Close your eyes for a moment. It's February 1964. You're sitting in your living room, the glow of a black and white television flickering across the shag carpet. Ed Sullivan walks to the microphone and says 4 words that would end careers overnight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. What if I told you that 73 million Americans watched that broadcast? And by the time the credits rolled, some of the biggest names in American music were already finished. That the teen idols who had dominated your radio, filled your record collection, and headlined every concert you attended would soon be playing to audiences of 40 people in small clubs? We're not talking about a gradual decline. We're talking about artists who sold 25 million records, suddenly unable to get their phone calls returned. Stars who had filled arenas, reduced to performing at British working men's clubs, just to pay the bills. Names you grew up with. Voices that soundtracked your first dance, your first heartbreak, your Saturday afternoons, silenced almost overnight. Today, we're counting down 12 American stars whose careers were shattered by the British invasion, and some of their stories will break your heart. If you lived through this era, you remember these voices. And if this channel helps you reconnect with that music, consider subscribing, because we're preserving the stories the history books keep forgetting. Let's begin. Number 12, Bobby Rydell. Bobby Rydell's timing couldn't have been worse. In January 1964, his single, Forget Him, climbed to number 4 on the Billboard charts, his 5th gold record. He was just 21 years old, the youngest performer to ever headline the Copacabana in New York. The high school in Greece would later be named after him, as a tribute to his influence. But here's the cruel irony most people don't know. Paul McCartney later admitted that Forget Him directly influenced She Loves You, the Beatles' biggest selling single. The very song that helped inspire a Beatles hit would be among the last successes Bobby Rydell ever had. After 1965, Rydell never charted on the Billboard Hot 100 again. He signed with Frank Sinatra's Reprise label, but, as he later recalled, there was no promotion. The British invasion hurt all of the American artists, Rydell said in interviews. The 45 wasn't selling at the time, the 45 was the American sound. He spent the rest of his career on the nostalgia circuit, eventually joining Frankie Avalon and Fabian as the Golden Boys of Bandstand, a tour that was supposed to last a year, 2 years tops. It ran for 37 years, until his death in 2022. 3 decades of performing the hits that radio stations had stopped playing. Number 11, Fabian.
This is the first time I ever...
Fabian was different from the other teen idols. He knew he wasn't really a singer. Bob Marcucci discovered him sitting on his front steps at age 14 while his father was being taken away in an ambulance. Marcucci saw the face, not the voice. As Fabian himself admitted, "They gave me a pompadour, some clothing, and those goddamn white bucks, and off I went." His recording career had essentially ended by 1960. His last charted record reached only number 91. The British invasion didn't destroy Fabian's music career, because there wasn't much left to destroy. But Fabian was smarter than people gave him credit for. He trained in acting with Sanford Meisner and Leonard Nimoy because he knew music couldn't last. When the invasion hit, he had already pivoted to films, appearing alongside John Wayne in North to Alaska and James Stewart in Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation. Decades later, Quentin Tarantino would call his 1968 film The Wild Racers his favorite racing movie. The teen idol who couldn't really sing had found a way to survive. Number 10, Frankie Avalon.
I'll never let you go. Why? Because I love you.
If you spent Saturday afternoons at the drive-in watching Beach Blanket Bingo, you remember Frankie Avalon. Between 1958 and 1962, Avalon charted 31 singles on Billboard, including 2 #1 hits. Venus held the top spot for 5 weeks in 1959. He was the prototype of the pop music teen idol, created on American Bandstand. But by 1964, his recording career had collapsed. Sometimes there wouldn't be more than 40 people in the audience, he recalled, describing his small club performances in the years that followed. Avalon's response to the British invasion was revealing. In Bikini Beach, released in 1964, he played a dual role, including Potato Bug, a John Lennon-esque British rocker. Critics called it a savage response to the Beatles displacing American artists. The Beach Party films became his salvation, providing steady income to support his 8 children when the music dried up. "Those movies limited me without a doubt," he admitted, "but I didn't care. I enjoyed them." He survived by adapting, something not every American star was able to do. Number 9, Chubby Checker.
Come on, baby. Let's do the twist.
Here's a statistic that might shock you. In 2008, Billboard named The Twist the biggest hit of all time, a title it held until 2020, when The Weeknd's Blinding Lights finally surpassed it. Chubby Checker was the only artist in history to have 5 albums in the top 12 position simultaneously. Dick Clark himself declared, "The 3 most important things that ever happened in the music industry are Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and Chubby Checker." And yet, after the British invasion, Checker vanished from the charts. His last top 40 hit was "Let's Do the Freddie" in 1965. Ironically, a song based on British act Freddie and the Dreamers. From 1965 until 1982, he had no chart appearances whatsoever. The bitterness stayed with him. "Twist and Shout gets more airplay than The Twist," he protested, and that's not right. He picketed outside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2002, demanding recognition. He wasn't inducted until 2025, nearly 40 years after becoming eligible. The man who created the biggest dance craze in American history spent decades fighting for acknowledgement, while the British acts who displaced him received instant recognition. The twist changed how America danced, but the industry forgot who taught them. Number 8, the Shirelles. Before there were British bands covering American songs, there were the Shirelles, and they paid the highest price. In 1961, "Will You Love Me Tomorrow" made them the first black female group to reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Tonight you're mine completely.
Soulja Boy topped the charts again in 1962. They had 26 pop chart entries and helped create the girl group sound. Then came the cruel mathematics of the British invasion. When their 1964 single "Sha-La-La" started gaining momentum, Manfred Mann covered it, and disc jockeys chose to play the British version instead of the original. Their last chart appearance was number 99 in 1967. The pattern was devastating for girl groups across America. The Chiffons' "He's So Fine" hit number 1 in 1963, then became the subject of the longest plagiarism case in U.S. history, when George Harrison was found to have subconsciously plagiarized it for "My Sweet Lord." Harrison was ordered to pay $587,000, but the case didn't conclude until 1998. Many British bands scored their first American hits by covering girl group songs, building their invasion on the backs of the artists they displaced. Number 7, Connie Francis. Between 1958 and 1964, Connie Francis was the most popular female vocalist in America, period.
Let it thunder.
She had 53 entries on the Billboard Hot 100, including 3 number 1 singles. "Everybody's Somebody's Fool" in 1960 made her the first woman ever to reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. She sold over 100 million records worldwide. Then the British invasion arrived, and suddenly her music seemed old-fashioned. The relatively innocent songs and public persona of Francis seemed out of step during an era of a rising counterculture. historians noted. Her final top 40 hit was 1964. She never had another American hit again. But what happened after her chart exile was far more devastating than lost record sales. On November 8, 1974, she was attacked in her hotel room after a Westbury Music Fair performance. The crime went unsolved. She won a landmark $2.5 million lawsuit that changed hotel security nationwide. But as she later said, "It took 7 years out of my life. I didn't grant an interview for 7 years. I didn't sing for 7 years." In 1981, her brother George was murdered outside his New Jersey home. She was hospitalized multiple times through the 1980s. Yet in 2025, at age 87, her 1962 song, Pretty Little Baby, went viral on TikTok, with over 25 billion views. She passed away in July 2025, but not before seeing a new generation discover her voice. Number 6, the Everly Brothers. This one hurts because the Everly Brothers didn't just lose to the British invasion, they created it. The Beatles literally learned to harmonize by imitating Don and Phil. Paul McCartney admitted, "When John and I first started to write songs, I was Phil and he was Don." The Beatles even considered naming themselves the Foreverly Brothers. Their vocal arrangement of Please Please Me was based directly on the Everly Brothers' Kathy's Clown. Before February 1964, the Everlys had 35 Billboard Top 100 hits and 4 #1 singles. Kathy's Clown sold 8 million copies. After the invasion, of 27 singles released between 1963 and 1970, only 3 made the Hot 100. Their final top 40 hit was Bowling Green at number 40 in 1967. The brothers' famous on-stage breakup at Knott's Berry Farm in 1973 captured the devastation. Phil smashed his guitar and told the audience, "The Everly Brothers died 10 years ago," meaning 1963, the year before the British invasion officially began. Don later reflected, "It was really a funeral. The press hadn't paid any attention to us in 10 years, but they jumped on that. It was one of the saddest days of my life. They had taught the Beatles to sing, and watched those harmonies end their careers. The student had surpassed the teacher in the cruelest way imaginable." Drop your guess in the comments. Who do you think is number 1 on our list? Number 5, Dion DiMucci.
World was my appetizer. I turned gang into fertilizer.
By 1963, Dion had amassed 39 top 40 hits. Runaround Sue hit number 1 in 1961. The Wanderer reached number 2. He was one of rock and roll's most prominent performers, the Bronx Street Kid who made it to the top. Then 9 of his next 10 single releases between 1964 and 1967 failed to crack the Billboard Hot 100. By 1965, he had slipped off the charts completely. But Dion tells a different story than most displaced artists. "A lot of people thought the British thing blew a lot of people away," he said. "I don't remember it that way. It didn't knock me on the roadside. I remember stopping. It was a very conscious decision." He spent years in Greenwich Village with Bob Dylan, John Sebastian, and Richie Havens, immersing himself in blues while battling heroin addiction. Columbia Records bristled at his shift toward blues material. Here's the detail that says everything about his influence. Dion and Bob Dylan appear as the only rock artists on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album cover. The British invasion acknowledged the American they had displaced. His comeback, Abraham Martin and John, reaching number 4 in 1968, proved that some artists could find a second act. At age 85 in 2024, he released a new album. The Wanderer is still wandering. Number 4, Ricky Nelson.
I'm a traveling man, made a lot of stops all over the world.
The expression teen idol was first coined to describe Ricky Nelson. Think about that for a moment. He had 54 songs on the Billboard, Hot 100. Poor Little Fool in 1958 was the first ever #1 on the newly created Billboard Hot 100. Between 1958 and 1959, he enjoyed 8 consecutive top 10 singles. Not even Elvis or Pat Boone matched that consistency. After the British invasion, his chart career came to a dramatic halt. After For You reached #6 in early 1964, he had no more top 50 hits until 1969. The Madison Square Garden incident in 1971 captured his impossible position. At a rock and roll revival concert, Nelson appeared with long hair and bell-bottoms. After playing his old hits, he performed the Rolling Stones' Country Honk. The crowd booed. His response became his only top 10 hit since 1963, Garden Party, which reached #6 in 1972. The famous lyrics said it all. But if memories were all I sang, I'd rather drive a truck. By the time of his death, Nelson was $4 million in debt, touring an average of 250 nights per year just to stay afloat. On December 31st, 1985, his plane crashed in DeKalb, Texas. A faulty cabin heater ignited a fire. He was 45 years old. The first ever teen idol died trying to pay bills the British invasion helped create. The boy who had everything lost it all, and spent his final years chasing a past he could never recapture. Number 3, Del Shannon.
Where you gonna stay, yeah?
Del Shannon's story contains the cruelest irony of the entire British invasion. Runaway hit #1 for 4 weeks in April 1961. Billboard ranked it the 5th biggest song of that year. His distinctive falsetto and Max Crook's innovative Musitron synthesizer created a sound nobody had heard before. On April 18, 1963, Shannon headlined at London's Royal Albert Hall with the Beatles as his opening act. After hearing them perform From Me to You, he recorded it, becoming the first American artist to chart with a Beatles song, months before the British invasion officially began. Jerry Marsden later claimed Shannon's records were like an instruction manual for fledgling British bands. He helped create the very invasion that destroyed him. After the invasion, Shannon was typecast as a has-been. His last US top 10 hit was late 1964. By 1989, he was recording with Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne, rumored to replace Roy Orbison in the Traveling Wilburys. Then on January 24th, 1990, he began taking Prozac for stress. 15 days later, on February 8th, 1990, Del Shannon took his own life. He was 55. His widow later said, "Suicide was totally out of character for my husband. There was no note and no goodbye." The Traveling Wilburys recorded a cover of Runaway in his honor. The man who taught the British bands how to rock never got to join them. His voice still echoes in every song they recorded, even if the credits never said his name. Number 2, Neil Sedaka.
And as I hold you near.
After 5 years of hits, Neil Sedaka recalled, "The bottom fell out." By 1963, Sedaka had sold 25 million records worldwide, second only to Elvis Presley from 1958 to 1963. Breaking Up Is Hard to Do hit #1 in 1962. Calendar Girl reached #4. He was at the absolute peak of his career. Then the Beatles arrived. From 1964 to 1966, only 3 of his singles cracked the Hot 100, at positions 86, 76, and 89. RCA. Victor dropped him in 1966. He also discovered his stepfather and manager had been squandering his savings. The Beatles, not good, Sedaka said bluntly. "I thought my career was over. I was 23. Here's where his story becomes almost unbelievable. To survive, Sedaka moved his family to England, the very country whose music had destroyed his career, and performed at British working men's clubs. The irony is not lost on him, he has stated in interviews. But the British saved him too. Elton John signed Sedaka to Rocket Records. Laughter in the Rain hit #1 in 1974. Bad Blood, featuring Elton on backing vocals, hit #1 in 1975. Neil Sedaka became the only artist in history to record the same song in 2 different versions that both reached #1, when his ballad version of Breaking Up Is Hard to Do charted in 1975. The country that ended his first career gave him his second one. Before I reveal #1, think about who was the absolute biggest American star of this era. Who had the most to lose? #1, The Four Seasons and Frankie Valli. The Four Seasons are #1 on a list of artists the Beatles destroyed. Here's why they top this list. They're the exception that proves the rule. While every other American act crumbled, the Four Seasons achieved their greatest success during the British invasion. They racked up 13 top 10 hits between 1962 and 1967. Ragdoll topped the charts in July 1964, during peak Beatlemania. Dawn, Go Away reached #3, blocked from #1 only by 3 Beatles songs simultaneously. VJ Records even released an album called The Beatles vs. the Four Seasons, The International Battle of the Century. A 2-record set letting fans score both bands. So what made them different? Frankie Valli explained, "The Beatles-led British invasion changed the musical landscape, but we stayed the course. We wound up putting out hits and kept it all going. It all comes down to be who you are." Bob Gaudio wrote Sherry in 15 minutes. Valli's 3-octave falsetto was impossible to imitate. Their working-class Newark authenticity felt real in a way the clean-cut Philadelphia teen idols never did. Most importantly, they refused to imitate British acts. They didn't grow their hair. They didn't change their sound. They just kept being the Four Seasons. Their 1976 comeback hit. December 1963. Oh, what a night. Nostalgically celebrates the last moment before the Beatles arrived. That final instant when they reigned as the most successful white rock group in the world, unaware of the oncoming invasion. The Four Seasons proved that survival was possible, but they were the exception. For the other 11 artists on this list, and dozens more we didn't have time to cover, February 9th, 1964 marked the end of everything they had built. The British invasion didn't gradually erode American pop dominance. It demolished it within weeks. British acts went from 3 top 40 hits in 1963 to 133 across 1964 and 1965. Stars who had sold 25 million records found themselves performing at working men's clubs. Artists who had filled arenas couldn't draw 40 people. But here's what the British invasion couldn't erase: the music itself. Through TJ Lubinski's PBS specials, the Oldies radio format, and the Happy Together tours, these displaced artists found second careers. Neil Sedaka discovered that Britain, which destroyed his first career, would give him his greatest comeback. The Four Seasons proved that authenticity could survive any trend. And today, new generations are discovering Runaround Sue, The Twist, Will You Love Me Tomorrow, and Breaking Up Is Hard to Do through streaming and social media. 73 million people watched the Beatles that February night, but hundreds of millions more have since discovered the American artists they displaced. If these stories resonated with you, hit subscribe, because we're preserving the music and memories that deserve to be remembered. Drop a comment telling me which artist's story surprised you most. And remember, the songs that shaped your youth are still shaping the world. That's a legacy no invasion could destroy. These artists deserve better, but their music ensured they would never be forgotten. Until next time.